Welcome back to the TheReviewSpace podcast. Another podcast episode. This one is going to be the Halloween special, the Halloween edition. And it has been a while. I know I've been away for quite a long time. It's been at least a few months since I've made a video. I just haven't had the time to create anything new or just have any fresh ideas. So this one, I really want to talk about some Halloween stuff. And this is going to be part of the Turning 30 podcast because I'm still 30 years old. It's still 2017, and as this year comes to an end, we're really in the last couple of months now, and Halloween, I'm recording this on Halloween, October 31st, 2017. I want to talk about my past history and my past experiences back in the day as a child on the Halloween day. So every time the Halloween would come around, the stuff that I would do basically, and I might even get into horror themed video games. Some of my favorite video games that I like to play that have a horror theme to it. I've never been the biggest horror gamer, because I haven't really played that many, at least not as much as I'm sure some other people out there, but there's a few that have really stood out for me. And so Halloween itself is probably one of the best holidays. I think for a lot of people it is one of the best holidays, if you can even consider it a holiday. I mean, I don't think people don't really take breaks off. It's not one of these holidays where it's like Christmas where you gotta take the day off and everybody gets the day off. Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff. Halloween is just a casual holiday that it's more about celebrating scary stuff like horror movies and dressing up and wearing costumes. It's supposed to be scary costumes, I think, but that's the idea behind it. At least that was my impression of Halloween when I was a kid, that you dressed up as a monster, some kind of monster or a ghoul or some kind, if you're a woman you dress up as a witch. You dressed up as a werewolf, as Frankenstein, something like that stereotypical old school Halloween feel. And for some reason, I don't know, just over the years, it just kind of morphed into, now, in the modern times, Halloween is just an excuse for women to dress up like hoochie mamas, scantily clad cosplay fictional video game characters, and for men to just, I don't even know. I have no idea what people dress. I don't know. They want to dress up as caricatures. They want to dress up as memes. I think that's a big thing, is dressing up as a meme, some kind of internet phenomenon. Some kind of viral internet reference. So Halloween has it's not really about scaring people anymore. I mean, at least not in that sense of let's go watch a horror movie and it's you know what I mean. First of all, as much as I like Halloween, I think it is a really cool holiday. There's a lot of cool things that you can do, and there's a lot of candy and the festivities, and it just feels like it's a perfect fun time during a really cold period during the season, because it's right in the middle of the fall. You know what I'm saying? So it gets really cold at night. This is the time of the year when the weather gets a lot grayer, and especially here in the in BC, British Columbia, Vancouver area, it just gets kind of rainy. It rains a lot. It's really cold. That cold chill, during that fall season, it's everywhere, man. It's really chilly outside. So I have no idea how I was able to put up with it when I was a kid, because back in the day, even back then in the 90s, I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 1987, but I grew up throughout the 90s. I never really went trick or treating. The closest in the 90s to trick or treating, so when I was a small kid, 10, 11 years old, something like that, I never really went trick or treating. The closest would be going to the mall and getting candy, because at the mall they do hand out free candy there. So, and that was the most basic thing that I did. It really wasn't anything eventful. Other kids did, other children and young kids that were my age I'm sure they did back in the 90s, but I was never really caught up in that. When I started doing that whole trick-or-treating thing, I didn't start doing until the early 2000s, by the time I already got in high school. So in high school, so you're talking about 2002, 2003, 2004, around that time, the kids that I was hanging out with, my associates and my buddies, they were all kind of into the Halloween thing. Like, they were all into it. And so during every Halloween, for at least 3 years straight, we just kind of went out, and we would go trick-or-treating. We didn't even wear costumes, because between all of us, it was just kind of, we were all high school students. So, I don't know, we're like 15, 16, 17 years old, around that age, and it was just like a gag for us, you know what I mean? It was just something like funny to do. It was almost like tongue-in-cheek, where, it's a bunch of grown students and high school students that were asking for money. Not asking for money, asking for chocolate and candy. I wish we got money. We were going door to door throughout the town and going trick-or-treating. We'd knock on the doors, and we go like, trick or treat, yada yada yada, and then they would give us the candy. I don't think kids today even do that anymore. Like young kids. I'm not sure, at least not in this region, not in the West Coast Canada. I don't think the kids do that today. Maybe they still do, but from what I remember, very few people did that, even back in the late 90s. So even when I was in elementary school, around Halloween time, because I used to live in Surrey. My family was located in Surrey, and even back then, by the late 90s, like 1999, nobody really did it. I think I saw like one sad kid, like trick-or-treating. He had like his mom nearby, and she would like kind of watch over him, and he was the only kid that was doing the trick-or-treating thing in our whole neighborhood. And this was like on Halloween night, you know what I mean? And like nobody was outside, nobody was doing anything, nobody was out and about, everybody was just kind of indoors. But by the early 2000s, it was a little bit different. We moved to a different city, and my buddies that I hung out with, they were all into that. Like every Halloween, they played with fireworks and firecrackers. They were all about that. So I got exposed to that a little bit of fun where, okay, let's have a bottle rocket fight. And we go out at the local elementary school at nighttime, at Halloween night, and we would have bottle rocket fights. This is back in 2003, around that time, and we would we would fire bottle rockets at each other, and it was just it was very similar to what Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy did during that broken Hardy segments back in TNA. If you guys remember that Total Deletion or whatever it's called, they had those really fun segments where they would at the Hardy compound where they live. I think it's in the Carolinas. They ended up firing bottle rockets at each other, firing fireworks and firecrackers at each other, and that was very similar to what we did. We just have these bottle rocket wars, I guess. It's kind of funny because we'd spend money on these firecrackers during Halloween. We'd buy them, and I get like I got like a bunch of bottle rockets, and I forgot how much it cost, maybe like $10. And for some reason, I ended up holding on to one, because I think I didn't want to use up every single one of them, so I got one. I got one left over. And so I kept it in my backpack. So I never used it during Halloween night. I kept it to myself, and I kept it for like a whole year. I kept it in my drawer in my bedroom. So I kept it inside, like tucked away, like stashed away. I thought that I thought I was being smart and like saving up for the future, for if we ever have any future bottle rocket fights. And I think in my mind back then, so I must have been around like 15 or 16 years old. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to save it for next year. I'm going to save this last extra one for next year, for next Halloween. And so the next Halloween comes around, and so a whole year goes by. I still have this bottle rocket. I still have it in my drawer. So I take it out. It's Halloween night again the following year. So I ended up showing it to my buddies. They're like, "Hey, check it out! I got it from I kept it from last year." They're like, "Oh, dude," they were just like, "What the hell are you thinking? Like, is that even gonna work? You know what I mean? Like, you've had it for a year, like, dude, what's wrong with you? Like, you should have used it." But I ended up bringing it out again. When we left, we were hanging outside, and then I don't know, like, they all started urging me to do it. It got to a point where we're hanging out again at night, and they were like kind of urging me to use it again. Like, come on, dude, don't use it. And everybody was just kind of doing the whole pressuring me to do it and use it. Come on, dude, just use it. Just fire. I think we came across like a kid, some other kid from I don't know, like some other kid that we knew, but we didn't like him. So they were telling me to basically fire the bottle rocket at him. And God, this story is completely botched, but they were just like, "Yeah, do it, man. Come on, do it. Come on, don't be a pussy. Don't use it." So I take out the bottle rocket. I think that somebody lights it, and I aim it at the person to kind of fire the bottle rocket, but it didn't work. It basically did not work. I held on to the stupid bottle rocket for like a whole year, and it just didn't work. It basically was a dud, and they were like, "Ah, dude, come on, what a flop." You know what I mean? Everybody just like disappointed because it was a dud. I don't know if it was an actual dud bottle rocket, but it's been a whole year. You know what I mean? I kept this thing in my drawer for a whole year, this one bottle rocket. So I guess what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to use them right away, because they worked the previous year. Like, they worked completely fine the previous year. So this year, the year that we're out again, and I try to try to use it again, try to actually light it up and try to fire it. It didn't work. Like, nothing happened. So yeah, that long-winded story was kind of a lame. I really am horrible at retelling these stories. To be fair, though, I haven't thought about this stuff in over a decade. You know what I mean? Since the early 2000s. So it was a dud. So if there's anybody out there that is planning on using bottle rockets, I mean, you should use them right away, because you shouldn't really hold on to firecrackers and fireworks for too long, because they're probably not going to work after like a year. They're probably not going to, it's just not going to, it's not going to function properly. It's like, I don't know, for some reason it just doesn't work after a while, because something happens with the wick, or something happens with the powder. I guess there's some kind of powder inside. I don't know. Something happens. I'm just theorizing it. But I'm assuming that that's what actually happens, is that after a while, fireworks and firecrackers, they just stop working, because it's like a dud. It becomes a dud after a while. It becomes impotent after a while. And but we did enjoy going trick-or-treating. It was more of a tongue-in-cheek during high school. Like, it was an excuse to get free candy, because we all like free candy. I mean, this was at a time when we still had kind of a childish mentality. And keep in mind, this was the kind of crew that I rolled with, too. This was the kind of, like, this group of friends were people that they loved skateboarding, they liked doing pranks, and doing, like, funny, dumb stuff. Kind of like, the people in Jackass, on that TV show MTV Jackass. That's the kind of guys that those guys were. They like pulling stunts and doing pranks and just being physically funny. And doing, like, just wild stuff. So, I don't know. And then so we just started doing trick-or-treating around 2002, 2003, 2004, something like that, during those years. And, just getting free candy, going door to door. And people are just looking at us like, aren't you a little too old to be doing this? Like, ugh, look at these bums, And again, we never wore any costume. I don't remember anybody rocking any costumes back then. You know what I mean? Like, nobody did. And we were too lazy. We didn't have any costumes. And by the way, like, wearing a costume back then, we didn't have any resources to actually use the costume. Like, we didn't have any, elaborate setup. We weren't cosplayers. We didn't have any budget for cosplaying. You know what I mean? So we didn't have actual costumes to use in the first place. So it's not like, even if we wanted to, oh, you're going to dress up as Mario and Luigi or whatever. We didn't have those kind of costumes. We didn't have any props or anything like that. So we just went out on Halloween night just to cause some chaos. It really is. I mean, those were some really fun times. I mean, honestly, it was just having that free spirit nature, that free spirit mentality of just, let's go out tonight. It doesn't matter, rain or shine, whatever, let's just do it. And thankfully, it never really rained during that time. Like it never. That was a worry that it would end up raining so much that it would be a rainy Halloween night. So it would really, that would really suck. You know what I'm saying? That would be a horrible time to spend just going door. I think it eventually did drizzle a little bit. One of the years it ended up drizzling a little bit later, and so it started to get a little bit cold. Man, and we just walk around town. We would just walk and walk and walk. We must have walked for miles just messing around and just like hanging out in the middle of the night. And this was at a time when like nobody really had smartphones. Not to the level that they do now. So that was back then. Not everybody had smartphones back then. Maybe a couple of people had a cell phone. So, that was fine, but not everybody had that, that bright source of light when you're walking in the middle of night. And so we were just kind of, it felt almost like an adventure. Because it would be constantly dark, and then you'll have the street lights, and then we come across a street light, and then we're like, yeah, alright. And then we'd have that confidence. We'd be like, all right, we're gonna have bottle rocket fights and stuff. And I remember coming across a couple of other people. We'd be walking in the middle of the street, like on the sidewalk, and we come across a couple of kids that we're like, oh no, what's going on here? Like we kind of took them as a threat at the beginning because we didn't know what the kids were. Like we didn't know who these kids were. They just came out with a couple of what do you call it? A couple of they looked like they had firecrackers in their hands, and they started lighting it up. And we were right nearby. We're like, oh crap! Like, are these guys gonna attack us with the firecrackers? And then they lit it up, and it was actually just fireworks. It was one of those I don't even know what you call it. Those sprinkle fireworks things that they just kind of spurt forth a little bit, and they just kind of drizzle out. And they were just, having fun in their front lawn. And I was like, we were kind of like, oh, we're just kind of disappointed. It was kind of embarrassing because we thought that these kids were a threat to us. Like, oh, we're walking by just a group of young teenagers, and then we come across another group of young people with seemingly firecrackers in their hands. We thought that we were going to get into a fight. But it turns out they just had fireworks as opposed to firecrackers. So we're like, ugh. Like we were in that mood of like we're gonna get into a fight. Like it was weird. Like walking around during Halloween night, it was just weird. It was a weird night. You know what I mean? It made you feel like you're gonna get into a scrap. I don't know why. I have no idea why. It's like that gang mentality almost. So I don't know. Let's see. Oh yeah. Halloween dances. That was very common back in the day. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Halloween dance in high school back then, that was the first dance of the year. During the school year, you'd have a couple of different, or several different school dances where it's like a fun time. A lot of the students go out. They have fun in the school, and it's a nice change of pace where you get to have fun and listen to some kind of music and actually enjoy and dance with your fellow students. And so I think Halloween was that first ever, that first ever school dance night. So, I mean, usually it would take place before Halloween, before the actual day. So, whatever the Friday was before Halloween, that's the day that we did it, for the most part. So, let's say Halloween is on, it's like right now. Like right now, I think Halloween is, what day is it? Is it Tuesday? Right, it's Tuesday today. So the Halloween, if this had been in high school, it would have taken place on a Friday on the 27th. Yeah, October the 27th. That would have been the Halloween dance. And that was a fun time. Like it was usually a fun thing, and they play the typical music, the typical cliche, Halloween music, Thriller by Michael Jackson, those kind of songs. So I was never really like super excited about it. The exciting part was that it was the first school dance. I really got into that stuff early on in high school, like the early 2000s. Not so much later on. I just got sick and tired of the music. I got tired of that whole scene because it was just like, it felt kind of pointless to do it. I wasn't having that much fun anymore at the school dances by the 11th and 12th grade, but earlier on, grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, it was kind of a fun time, and it was kind of enjoyable, and it was cool dancing with the girls. I mean, some of the girls were hot. I don't even remember anybody like really dressing up during those high school dances. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody ever really did it. Nobody really did it. Maybe a few people did. Maybe a couple did. Maybe a couple of like the teachers that were supervising it. You know what I mean? But it really wasn't. Nobody really cared about dressing up in during Halloween. Like, nobody did it simply because it was either perceived as it was too lame, it was too corny, or it was just something that nobody had access to actual costumes. I don't have time or the energy or the money to spend, all this time creating a costume or getting a costume. Like, it doesn't matter. It was completely like, whatever. Let's just have fun. Let's just dance. Let's just go out. At least that was the case back in those days. Back in the, the early 2000s. I don't know what it's like now. Maybe it changed now. Maybe now people take it a little bit more seriously, where they actually have costumes. I don't know. I have no clue. But yeah, Halloween was a cool time, and those bottle rocket fights were really fun. Getting the candy, although again with the candy thing, man, it was just an excuse to go out, get some free candy, bum some candy off people, because some of the candy was pretty good. Some of it was actually decent. Most of it was like, most of it you got the Reese's Pieces, right? You got that 3-pack or double pack or whatever it was, Reese's Pieces, and you're just like, ugh. But the good ones were the Mars bars and those big chocolate chunky candy bars with the nougat, and those ones are usually the best ones. The Skittles were okay, but Skittles were your typical very generic candy. You got those really crappy, those thin ones that look like mini candies, those little colorful ones that they look like cylinders. I forgot what they were called, but those were not good at all, and I have no idea. Like, every year we got those too, and every single year they were like the cliche cheesy candy that nobody really wanted to eat. Like, they were garbage. Nobody cared about them. It was trash. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to remember like the worst thing that I got in Halloween, the worst candy or the worst item that I ever received. I mean, you get some crappy ones every now and then. You get some like, maybe a crappy sucker, a crappy lollipop or something like that that's just completely flavorless or completely like generic. Those ones are completely uninspired. But gosh, those were the days, man, because you just headed out. You didn't care. You didn't want to stay in. You didn't want to stay in during Halloween night. You know what I'm saying? You just wanted to go out and have some fun. Most of the year, you want to stay indoors and play video games, but during Halloween night, that was one exceptional year where you actually went out and socialized with other people, with your peers. But let's see. I'm trying to remember. Okay, so when it comes to video games, because I brought up the video game thing, so Halloween, especially in the past like 10, 12 years, it's been just like I've never really celebrated it. I've never really sat down and celebrated Halloween where, alright, I gotta go watch Halloween movies or scary movies or whatever. I mean, I'll watch horror movies any time of the year, so it doesn't really matter if it's Halloween or not. I know, like, on TV, the TV networks will start playing Halloween movies constantly, scary movies and horror themed films. They'll have these marathons. But for me, I'll watch horror movies anytime. It doesn't matter if it's during the springtime, in the middle of summer, on December, like around Christmas time. It doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? It's not a big deal to me, and so I don't really celebrate Halloween. It's not something that I go like, okay, I gotta go celebrate it by watching horror movies, or I gotta play horror video games, or I gotta listen to horror music. Although there was a couple of times, maybe around like 2006 or 2005, where I had nothing else to do. I was out of high school, so I wasn't really like hanging out with those dudes anymore because we all graduated. Everybody kind of went their separate ways. So there was those years where I would stay in at a Halloween night, and I was completely bored and had nothing to do. So all I did was listen to songs that were like Halloween themed or Halloween inspired. So there was at least a couple of years there where I did do that. I did enjoy Halloween music. And when I say Halloween music, I'm not talking about like specifically like cheesy Halloween songs, but the ones that's like, like I used to listen to a lot of rap music. So I would listen to rap music that had horror themes in it. You know what I'm saying? I would listen to, one of my favorites was Scary Movies by Eminem and Royce da 5'9". I think it's Bad Meets Evil. That was on the Scary Movie soundtrack. That thing at the beginning where it's like, so what's your favorite scary movie? What's your scary movie? So you want to see a movie? I forgot the chorus. I forgot how it went, but yeah, that's a great song. And that's not even like a scary song. It's just a rap song by Eminem and Royce da 5'9", talking about like they mentioned scary movies a couple of times in the lyrics, but it was just like braggadocio, typical late '90s, early 2000s hip hop. It wasn't really talking about anything horrific or scary or horror themed. You know what I'm saying? So it really wasn't a horror themed rap song. You know what I mean? It wasn't like horrorcore or anything like that. And even back then, I never really listened to horrorcore back in the early 2K. Like, in my peak, when I was in high school, in my peak years of listening to hip-hop music and rap music back in the day, I mean, even back then, I never really listened to a lot of horrorcore music. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't listen to ICP. The closest would be like Cage. I did like a few Cage songs. I thought Cage was dope, and his album Movies for the Blind I thought was really tremendous. But aside from Cage and maybe a few other like Necro, there's a couple of Necro songs that I enjoy. And even Necro, I think Necro refers to his music as death rap. He doesn't call it horrorcore, but he calls it death rap. Kind of like how there's death metal. Well, his music is death rap. And I'm just, I kind of roll my eyes like, alright, whatever. It's pretty much horrorcore, But, I don't know. I never really got into the horrorcore scene, I would say, like, I'm more of an ICP fan now, in my adult years. As a 30-year-old, I like ICP, Insane Clown Posse, more now that I have more exposure, like, on the internet. Like, I see them more on the internet. I got their music, like, I watch their music videos. I got their music videos saved on my PS3, so I watch those every now and then. And I never did that back then. I just never got into ICP when I was in high school. I just never, I never hated him or anything like that. I was just completely, like, uninterested, and I didn't really care about ICP back then. And because I think maybe a part of it was because they had such a negative reputation. So I had this dismissive attitude towards them, like, whatever, ICP. I don't really care. It's like if you mention, go listen to Soulja Boy. Oh, listen to Soulja Boy. I'd be like, I don't really care about Soulja Boy. You know what I'm saying? Like, his music does not interest me at all. The same thing with ICP. I had no desire to listen to ICP records until like many years later, until like the 2010s. So in this decade, I'm more of a fan of them now than I was at all back when I was a teenager. You know what I'm saying? I did enjoy them in wrestling. You know what I'm saying? Like, my first exposure to ICP was the late 90s during the Attitude Era, when Insane Clown Posse appeared on WWF during the Monday Night Wars. And they did the theme song and the theme music to the Oddities. And I thought that was really catchy, and that was a really fun time in wrestling. That boy, bitty boy, you wanna be down with a clown? Ah, people don't like these oddities. Da 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 da. Shout at me. You know, and that was a really cool theme song. It was really catchy. It was really cool. It was really fun. And then ICP, after a while, they just disappeared. You know what I'm saying? The oddities would come out, and ICP was gone. They were no longer a part of the group. Like, they left the company, or, you know, it was gone. And, you know what I mean? It was done by then. And so I was like, you know, they kind of lost a really cool part of the act, and the oddities just kind of declined afterwards. But that was the best part of the oddities, was when they had the ICP rappers with them. You know, Violent J and Shaggy. That was really cool. That was the complete version of the oddities. You know what I'm saying? And man, I really, the late 90s had some pretty cool stables like that, and they were probably one of the more underrated stables and factions during that time in the late 90s. So anyway, that was my very limited exposure to Insane Clown Posse. And then during the early 2000s and the feud with Eminem and all that, you know, I was more of an Eminem fan, but, you know, I wasn't so much like super pro Eminem and anti ICP. I just didn't care about ICP. You know, so I was just like, I was content with listening to whatever rap music I was listening to at that time. I mean, I listened to a lot of stuff too back in those days, whether it's, you know, underground hip hop and independent hip hop, mainstream hip hop. I listened to just about anything that I could get my hands on, aside from a few, you know, other acts like an ICP or the stuff that I just don't know. You know, rappers that I've never heard of before until many years later. I mean, back in those days, I would listen to like Cannibal Ox and Dr. Octagon's Dr. Octagonacologist. You know what I'm saying? I was really into that. Deltron 3030 and Chaos and Swollen Members and Eminem and D12, and that was the cool stuff. You know what I mean? Immortal Technique. That was my ish. You know what I'm saying? That was the ish back then. You know what I mean? That was the hottest like rap music for me. So I never really got into ICP until just recently, the past couple of years, where I started to really appreciate them a lot more, and seeing the ciphers on YouTube and seeing their work, their actual music videos. Like, oh, this is really cool. You know what I'm saying? So that's So just to end the whole music thing, there was at least a couple of years in the mid 2000s where I actually listened to hip-hop music and just music in general that had some kind of horror, scary theme to it. You know, I remember another one by Will Smith. I think Will Smith had a Nightmare on Elm Street rap song. It's like, there's a nightmare on my street, do do do. Like, it sampled the Freddy Krueger Nightmare on Elm Street theme. And so, you know, this was a really old Will Smith song back in the day. He was the Fresh Prince back in those days. So there was a few of those tracks where it was really kind of cool. I think like the Weathermen, you know. So we're talking about Cage again. Cage had that song with the Weathermen. I forgot what the hell that song was called, but it sampled the movie Suspiria. It had that really cool sample. Suspiria is a movie from the late 70s and really kind of an underrated horror movie. It had a great theme song. Gling 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 la 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 la, and it's like the really creepy, really eerie kind of theme song. And the Cage Weathermen sampled it, and you know, they had a really cool rap song to it. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see if it's available, if I actually have it saved. It's not here. Oh well. It's not in my laptop at the moment. I'll go download it some other time. But yeah, so I never really. Yeah, every time Halloween comes around, I don't watch horror movies around this time because I'm just really not in the mood. And as far as video games, like even when it comes to video games, like scary video games and stuff like that, I don't really get into that either. I don't play horror video games when Halloween is around the corner. I don't really get into it. I'll play horror video games any time of the year, just like, you know, I'll watch movies any time of the year. I'll watch horror movies. But it just depends on what my mood is at that current time. Like, if I'm not into it, if I don't feel like it. Like, I remember a few years ago, I remember getting what the hell, that Infamous video game. So the Infamous series is really great, but they had that downloadable game on the PSN called Festival of Blood. I think that's what it's called, where it's like a vampire theme. So like Cole is like a vampire or something like that. He's got to fight like werewolves and stuff like that. So it was the Infamous video game, but it was set in a horror festival of Halloween kind of setting, where the people on the street are enjoying and celebrating. It's almost like a New Orleans setting, where it's almost like a Mardi Gras-esque Halloween thing, where everybody's dressed up in costumes, but then there's real monsters that would come out and fight you. So the main character, I think it was Cole, and he's like a vampire. He's got to suck the blood or whatever. Got to drain the energy of the people around him, so that he can refill his energy and stuff like that when he's fighting the monsters and so on and so forth. So it's pretty cool. It's actually really, really short too. Like, it's only $5 on the PSN, and you can see why. It's a really brief, like 2-hour, 3-hour experience at best, but still pretty fun. And I remember getting that around like 2014. And I'm thinking to myself, like, alright, I'm going to play this. I'm going to play this game. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to play it around Halloween time. So Halloween time comes around, October, late October comes around, and then Halloween passes, November, December, January, and then next thing you know, it's like the next year. It's 2015. I'm like, yeah, I haven't really played this Festival of Blood. I haven't really gotten into it. You know what I mean? So I just don't feel like it. You know what I mean? I'll play a video game when I feel like it, when my mood is into it. But if I'm not into playing a video game, well, even if it's Halloween and it's like, okay, it's scary times, you got to play a horror video game or a horror themed, you got to watch a horror themed movie, I'm just not into it. You know what I'm saying? I don't really care. I don't have to celebrate Halloween. I don't feel connected to it. I don't feel like it's something that I have to get into. But as far as like horror video games, because it is Halloween, and I am creating this video for the Halloween, for Halloween itself, I do want to talk about some of the scarier, not even scary, but like some of the best horror video games that I have played over the years. And I haven't really talked about video games in a long time. Obviously my channel has a lot of video game related content, but I haven't talked about gaming in such a long time. And just simply because I haven't been in the mood. I do play video games regularly, and there's a lot of video games that I still have to get to. I have so many games on the PS3. I still haven't gotten to them. You know what I'm saying? The PS3 has such a massive library of video games that it's going to take me quite a long time to get through every game that I own and really get into it and play it and hopefully beat as many as I can. And I just haven't really gotten around to. There's so many video games out there. I can't imagine getting a PS4 or an Xbox One and hopping onto the next system and not finishing the stuff that I have on the PS3. Like, that's how much stuff I have on the PlayStation 3. You know what I'm saying? I got so many games, and I'm such a lazy douche that I haven't gotten around to them. But anyway, so over the years, the scarier or the more interesting horror video games that I've played, there's a few good ones, and I'm going to start it off with the Resident Evil series. The Resident Evil franchise is obviously probably the most famous like zombie video game franchise or series. Just because it's been around for so long, it's been around since the mid-90s when I was a kid, the PS1 and all that, and it was one of the trademark franchises on the PlayStation, you know what I'm saying? Even though it did branch out eventually to other consoles. My very first experience, though, is in the early, the game that came out in the early 2K. I think it was called Resident Evil Code Veronica. I got the one on the PS2 many years later, called Code Veronica X. I got it on the collection, the Resident Evil Essentials collection, I think, and I got the Code Veronica X version. that was kind of a creepy video game, I gotta admit. You know, it still had shades of like the 90s gameplay, where that slow plotting gameplay, and the camera is fixed, and your character is exploring from room to room. So you go to a different area, and it fades to black, and then you're in a different area, and then you gotta explore that room and, you know, check out some stuff. The scariest part that I can remember in that video game, and it wasn't really a scary thing. Like, video games don't really scare me. Same thing with horror movies. Like, none of this stuff is scary because I'm an adult. You know what I'm saying? Like, even back when I was a teenager, this stuff that isn't really scary. Because once you reach a certain age, you just stop being creeped out. You become more intelligent and more logical, and when you get more mature, you just don't care about, like, fictional things that's supposed to be scary. Like, you can still get kind of shocked at a jump scare. Like, some creepy face comes out of nowhere, like those jump scares that you see on YouTube. You know, the scary maze game, and, you know, follow the dot and all that stuff. And then the picture of the exorcist girl comes up, and and you're like, okay, that's kind of creepy. That's a little bit different. That's just like very instantaneous. It's not. There's no atmosphere to it. It doesn't have the atmosphere. But with decent video games like the Resident Evil stuff, they do have some decent atmosphere. You know, they can have some pretty cool atmosphere. And playing Code Veronica X, I really did. I enjoyed the zombie dogs. The zombie dogs were kind of creepy. Like, they would come out of nowhere and then they would just attack you. And I always felt very anxious and creeped out by those, because it's like, holy crap, they're really fast, much faster than you, or at least a little bit faster than you. They're able to chase you basically, and they can kill you, and it's kind of creepy because it's dogs. You know what I mean? It's dogs without any skin. So it's like they got the flesh and all that. It just looks really kind of creepy, like demon dogs or whatever. I should say zombie dogs. And so that is kind of one of the creepier moments in that game. So it's not even like the actual monsters in Resident Evil. Like, I'm never scared by the creepier looking, you know, Nemesis and all that stuff. You know, the Nemesis or whatever other science experiment creatures that would attack you. You know, I never felt scared by those. But the ones that I found the most creepy or the scariest were, you know, the more the more realistic, not even realistic, but the more relatable ones, like a dog, a scary man-eating dog that can kill you. Like, I think that's really scary, because that could happen in real life. There's also, I also not necessarily scared, but I felt very uncomfortable when I'm running around those stupid zombies. You know, the zombies are really slow moving in Code Veronica X, but the way that the game works is that you're positioned in a way that they're close enough to reach out and grab you and reach out and kill you, and if you get too close to the zombies, you know, you get hurt. And so I always have to play, and you know, your character is so freaking slow anyway. Like, the way that your character jogs is very slow. So, you know, she's running around a cemetery, and you have to kind of maneuver very carefully around these stupid zombies. So I always felt kind of like, I gotta go through this again. Like, that's creepy. Like, ugh. And I just wanna move on to the next room. Like, please next, get to the next room. You know. So that's Code Veronica X. Pretty decent game. I never really finished it because I got stuck in that stupid airplane section. There's a part in there where I think you have to fire like some kind of rocket launcher or something at the enemy, and I never got around to that. I think I missed getting the I don't know. I just died. I just ended up dying all the time. Let's see. And then there's another one, I think, called Resident Evil. Oh God, what the hell was it called? The other one where, oh God, they're in a restaurant or something like that, and I remember there was a guy that looked like Ving Rhames, and it was like a multiple different set of characters. You know, it was almost like just a group of people that you control. And I forgot what it was called. Was it called oh God, Resident Evil some Outbreak? I think that's the one that was called Resident Evil Outbreak. I think that's the one. and you have that leech guy coming from the rooftop, or the vents, I should say. He would sneak through the vents, and he would fight you every time that you go inside a room. That was more annoying than scary. I mean, there was definitely a creepy factor to it, in that you're alone in this room, in this dark room, with this creepy leech monster. But it wasn't. It was more annoying. It was more irritating. It would be more like, oh crap, I have to deal with this idiot again, this piece of trash. Like, get the hell out of here. Get out of my face. Like, I wish I had a dynamite right now so I could blow this thing up. You know what I mean? It was more of a hindrance than anything else, like something annoying that would pester you constantly. You know what I mean? So that irritated me, and I thought that game overall was kind of a boring game. It was very repetitive, and I just didn't know where to go in that game. I never got too far in Resident Evil Outbreak. And then we get to Resident Evil 4. RE4 is definitely one of the better video games in the Resident Evil series. Now, I know I mentioned before in the past, it's overrated. I still do think that it is overrated, but it is a very good game nonetheless. If something's overrated, it doesn't mean that it's bad or that it sucks. It just means that it gets way too much credit, and people give it like a perfect score, like a 10 out of 10 or a 9.5 out of 10, where I personally thought it was a little bit lower than that. Maybe it was an 8 out of 10 or a 7.5 or something like that. Or maybe a little bit higher than that, maybe an 8.5. You know what I mean? So with Resident Evil 4, I really did enjoy that game, but that game was not scary. I can't imagine any scary moments in that game. It wasn't scary. It wasn't like, it's a horror game. I mean, technically it is a horror, action survival horror kind of experience, but I mean, it really wasn't frightening. It didn't scare me. I don't really remember anything scary about it. It was just an action game, you know what I mean, that had creepy looking characters and creepy looking bosses, and that's all it was. I wasn't. But by the time I got to the castle and I had to fight those hooded guys, I was just like, oh man, this is so ridiculous. It was more comical than anything else. Like, it became into a Hollywood blockbuster, almost like an Indiana Jones-esque kind of experience, where I have to rescue the girl, and then I have to run away I have to escape with the girl, escape the castle. It just became a ridiculous romp. And then over the years, I would end up playing the other Resident Evil games, Resident Evil 5, which, I did enjoy Resident Evil 5. I thought it was fun. Resident Evil 6, I thought was kind of fun. But they were not really scary. I mean, they're not really frightening experiences. They're just kind of these action games that had zombies in it. You gotta fight the zombie. You gotta shoot a shotgun at the zombie. You gotta fire a rocket launcher. You gotta kill him. You gotta shoot him up. It's a shoot 'em up. It's like Gears of War, meets Resident Evil. So it's not really scary. You know what I mean? I've played downloadable PSN games that were more scary than that. Like cheap 2D games that were horror themed. I remember this one PSN game I remember getting for like $5 or whatever. It's like your character was. It was a 2D game, so it was a flat, like, side-scrolling kind of game, and your character only had like a flashlight and like a gun with like limited ammo, and you're walking in this hotel. You're going through different like doors in the hotel, and there's like zombies in them, so you got to fight the zombies and stuff. So I thought that was a lot more creepy than any of the later Resident Evil games. You know what I'm saying? Like, between 4, 5, and 6, those were not frightening. So later on, let's see, and then we got to deal with like Resident Evil clones or rip-offs. Games that were inspired by Resident Evil. I should say post Resident Evil 4. So the ones that try to imitate the style of Resident Evil 4, that whole like over-the-shoulder shoot 'em up action experience. So those games would be, let's say, something like, oh god, what the hell was that? Oh god, I'm forgetting. Well, Cold Fear. Cold Fear is one. Cold Fear is one of those decent horror, survival horror type of games Not a bad game, but again, very similar to RE4. Not like super scary, not even scary at all, but it's just the main character has to fight monsters and zombie-like creatures in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of in a ship, in this cargo ship, and you're fighting these things, and it's always raining, so it's constantly raining when you're out on the deck, and when you have to fight the monsters. So it is kind of creepy in that sense that it's always like nighttime and it's always raining, and it's supposed to be creepy, but I don't know, like the atmosphere is kind of alright, and you got to read a lot of text, and you got to go through different doors and hallways, very narrow hallways where you can't escape, so you have to fight the monsters. Those moments are pretty cool, and Cold Fear is a decent game. It's a decent Resident Evil 4 clone, but at the same time, it's not a scary video game. I wouldn't say that it's scary or frightening at all. It's just kind of a cool little darker looking action game, or I don't know, survival action. And then we get to Dead Space, which I love Dead Space, especially the first one. But I also enjoy Dead Space 2. Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2. I haven't played Dead Space 3 yet. I don't really care about Dead Space 3. I heard that Dead Space 3 was bad, but so I kind of stick with the first two. I really did enjoy the first one, though. The first one and the second one, really, really fun stuff. And there's a few jump scares in those games that's like, oh, that was kind of creepy, or ooh, that was very surprising. But at the same time, going back to the Resident Evil 4 and Cold Fear, really not a scary, like super scary video game. It was more, it caused you some kind of anxiety when you're fighting a monster and you don't have much ammo. You know what I mean? Especially in the harder difficulty where you really have to fight for your life, and it feels like your back is always against the wall, and the monsters they swarm you, so you feel claustrophobic almost. But it's not scary, because there's something about like fictional alien monsters that's not scary to me. Like it doesn't make me feel afraid. It's more like, oh, that's fascinating, or that looks cool. You know what I'm saying? I'm battling a space alien evil creature, kind of like the alien xenomorphs in the Alien franchise. So I'm more fascinated by it. I'm like looking at it like I'm looking at a velociraptor or a dinosaur in Jurassic Park eating a human being. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, it's really gruesome and really bloody, but it's really cool. So you see your character, Zach or whatever, or Isaac, I forget the main character that you play as, that robot. And he's not a robot, but I mean, he might as well be. He's got that armor. I think it is Zach, right? And he's getting his limbs chopped off by the monsters. He's getting eviscerated. He's getting devoured by these creatures. And I'm just like, wow, that's really cool. Like, it's really violent, and this is sci-fi goodness. It's like Alien. It's like the alien xenomorph, and Ripley running away from the xenomorph. Like, this is so cool. It's not so much scary. It's not horror in a sense that, oh my god, the atmosphere is so creepy, and oh, I feel creeped out because like it's such a horrific. No, it's just a nice sci-fi action romp that has blood and gore and blood and guts. Like, that's what it is, and there's monsters. So as much as I love the Dead Space franchise, and I love Dead Space more than the Resident Evil 4, and the later Resident Evil series, I enjoy Dead Space a lot more, but still, not scary or frightening or anything like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's my experiences with horror video games, so-called horror, right? I mean, it's really not particular. It's not horrific. You know what I mean? Most of these so-called horror games are not frightening. And I haven't even mentioned some of the other ones. Like, I haven't mentioned Fear. I haven't mentioned the Silent Hill video games, because I never got into Silent Hill. You know what I mean? I never really played the Silent Hill series. I mean, those kind of video games that have monsters or weird things going on. Like, I enjoy the Dead Rising series. I mean, I have Dead Rising 2. I still enjoy Dead Rising 2. Dead Rising is cool to me. I love Dead Rising 2. But not scary. You're just, it's like it's a mall packed with zombies. It's a mall packed with zombies. Like, it's not scary. It's not a scary thing. I mean, maybe they're trying to be scary. Maybe there's a few moments in there that make you feel claustrophobic, or feel anxious and feel like you're trapped. But it's not horrific. Like, it reminds me a little bit of that movie Dawn of the Dead. There's no doubt. I mean, Dawn of the Dead from the 1970s. I didn't care so much about the remake from like 2004. Like, that one kind of sucked. But the one from the late 1970s I thought was a classic, a really fun movie. But even that movie wasn't horrifying. I mean, again, these are technically horror movies, these zombie films, but they're not scary to me. You know what I mean? There's nothing really scary or overtly freaky about it. Maybe if I had been younger, maybe if I was like 5 or 6 years old, maybe I would have been kind of creeped out by it. And that would have been a more frightening thing to see, more gruesome, and the blood and gore would have been more graphic as a small child. That would have been scarier or whatever. I might have felt more creeped out. But as an adult in my 20s, and now as a 30-year-old, I'm playing these video games like Dead Rising 2 or Dead Space or Resident Evil, and it's not scary at all. You know what I'm saying? It's not really frightening. It's just your basic sci-fi / horror, experience that's just kind of like action oriented. It's just action and shoot 'em up, and you gotta shoot the bad guy, you gotta kill the enemy. It's a little bit slower paced. It's not as fast as a first person shooter, but it's a bit more methodical. You gotta kill the enemy more methodically. So it's not particular. I guess my main criticism is that there's no psychological trick in your brain. They don't have the psychological edge where it makes you feel like you're, holy crap, like this is some crazy stuff going on. Like, this is some crazy shit right now. I need to get out of here. Like, I'm really creeped out. Like, I gotta go. Like, I gotta run away, or I gotta survive. Like, it's not creepy. It's not frightening. Like, a really scary video game, I got this idea in my head. Like, a scary game would be like if you play a game called there's a video game called Manhunt, and I really like Manhunt 2. Like, to me Manhunt 2 is one of the best more underrated video game sequels ever made, and I really did enjoy it. The idea of Manhunt 2 and the Manhunt series in general is that you're almost like a serial killer, and you're killing people. You're coming up behind them and you're stabbing them. You're shanking them in their neck, and you're putting a garrote around their freaking neck, and you're choking them to death, and you're killing them, and your character lurks in the shadow. You know what I'm saying? So your character is hanging out in the corner of some alley, or the corner of a building, and he sneaks out from the shadows and kills the enemy. And mind you, I mean, your character is killing bad guys. He's killing bad people. It's not like he's killing innocent people. But in the Manhunt games, the enemy, you got to kill these human enemies. They're human beings still, and you're stabbing them in the chest, and you're stabbing them like prison style. So it's really violent and gritty. And so the horror game in my head is thinking like, this would be a cool thing if you're the character that's being hunted. If there's a video game that had like one killer or multiple killers, and you have to, your character isn't good at fighting, and your character's main thing is to, the main gameplay is to hide from the villains and sneak around the villains, and like, and not get caught, not get caught by the enemy, and not get killed by these brutal serial killers, that's out to hunt you. Because even with the Manhunt series, the Manhunt series, your main character is a very tough a very tough prisoner that can definitely hold his own, that can kill multiple people. He can kill multiple guards and multiple prisoners, and this guy's a really tough son of a gun. You know what I'm saying? This guy's no joke. He's a killer himself. You know what I'm saying? So my vision of the really cool video game would be if your character is just a helpless, not completely helpless, but just a frail, smaller guy that just wants to survive, that just wants to stay alive, stay away, and not be caught by killers. So you're like the setting would be in a really dark building, in a dark abandoned building, and you gotta kind of hide away. You gotta hide in the shadows. You gotta sneak past the guards. You gotta sneak past the enemies. That's these killers. You gotta sneak past. To me, that's more terrifying. The idea of that is more horrifying and terrifying than being an overpowered military commando, like in Resident Evil or like in Dead Space, where you're like a cyborg and you're shooting and you're gunning down these monsters to death with high-tech weapons or machine guns and shotguns and rocket launchers. That's not scary, because your character still has some kind of power, some kind of... You're almost like the military, you know what I mean? And it's not really frightening to be in that position. It's more frightening to be a lonely, scared, single individual that has to deal with multiple killers, or even just one really strong killer, and you gotta figure out a way to stay the hell away from that villain, stay away from that person's target. Yeah, so I mean that's gonna do it for this episode of Turning 30 podcast, the Halloween edition. Hopefully I get this up by the end of the Halloween night. I mean, I don't know if this might even be up a little bit later. I have no idea. I just wanted to get some stuff out there and just be back on this channel. It's been a hot minute. I haven't made any videos in such a long time. I have been slacking for sure, but I definitely want to create more videos because it's been way too damn long. Alright, so it's your boy, TheReviewSpace. Gotta get the hell on out of here. And have a happy Halloween. I can't even speak properly anymore. Have a decent Halloween, y'all. And that's it. Until next time. Peace.